Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are here to do a recap of today's closing arguments. And if you guys haven't heard yet, the case has gone to the jury. They have been deliberating, I think, since about 1 o'clock, so it's almost 5 o'clock here, so 4 o'clock in Chicago. So maybe they've been deliberating about 3 hours. And one of the reporters noted that the 2008 case came back with a verdict in like 7.5 hours, and then the Eastern District of New York came back in about 9 hours. And so it would be interesting to see what the turnaround time will be on this jury. So we're going to go ahead and get into the live tweets. I'm not going to read any of the articles today because there was nothing new in any of them. So you're going to get everything. And for those of you who are new to the recap, these are the live tweets by the reporters that were in the courtroom covering the case. And so today I'm doing John Seidel, who I had been totally forgot about. So he hasn't been on any of my recaps in about a week or a week and a half. So John Seidel, John Messner. Megan wasn't in the courtroom today, so it's just Jason Messner, and then David Burns, who I have been doing every week. So let's start with John, and it says U.S. District Judge Harry Lennon Weber could be heard in the overflow room saying, "We should be out of here by 1 o'clock today. So we should be minutes away from the closing argument," from Kelly lawyer Jennifer Bonjean. And you guys might recall yesterday it was the prosecution, Darryl McDavid, and then Milton Brown did their closing. So today is Jennifer Bonjean, and this judge gave them a time limit, so there won't be any 6-7 hour statements, closing statements like we had in the Eastern District of New York. So the prosecution got 3 hours. McDavid got an hour and 45 minutes, or a little under an hour. And then poor Milton Brown, which they was just clowning him because they were like, "Do you really want to do a closing?" Because he ain't said nothing the whole trial, and nothing much has been said about him. But they were given, what were they given? 45 minutes, I believe, or I can't remember what they were given, because then he changed it, because he gave times last week, and then it seemed like he changed the times this week. And then I made a joke about 15 minutes. All they needed was 15 minutes. But I want to say he gave them more than 15 minutes. I think she asked for an hour, and she ended up with 45, and then probably took the 15 minutes that I said. And so then I know for a fact that Jennifer Bonjean got an hour and 45 minutes, and then the prosecution got an additional 57 minutes to come back and do a rebuttal to what the defense had said. And so he seemed to have followed that. Court did start an hour earlier today so that he could meet that 1 o'clock deadline and get the case to the jury. So let's see. Okay, so the Kelly trial getting off to an early start today. So we head into the final arguments. Jurors should have the case by the end of the day. And then a juror is running late, the judge says. She's on the way, apparently. The feds are raising issues about a 2009 lawsuit against Kelly, Darryl McDavid, and Milton Brown. Attorney Mary Judge, who is Milton Brown's attorney, spoke to the jury about it yesterday and showed the cover page. It wasn't in evidence, Fed said. Judge Lennon Weber says the record should stay the way it is. And so he basically has been denying all these motions that the prosecution has been putting up, which is a stark contrast to what was going on in the Eastern District of New York with Judge Donnelly. So prosecutors are also objecting to arguments that the feds waited 20 years to bring charges against Kelly and his co-defendants. They call it a jury nullification argument. Judge Lennon Weber says blaming the government would be a form of nullification. You can state how difficult it is because it took so long to bring the charges. So Assistant U.S. Attorney Jason Julian tells the judge that jurors would not be asked to consider forfeiture against the defendants. So I guess they want to do that themselves so they can try and take as much as they can if there is a guilty verdict. So sounds like jurors are coming in, so we should be getting underway. Bonjean, we are almost at the end of this journey we've been on, and it's soon time for you to take the wheel and decide this very serious and important case. Bonjean said odds are that most, let me close that out. That most jurors had some knowledge of Kelly coming into the trial, and chances are it is not particularly favorable. She says it occurred to her that Kelly needed a pseudonym like the alleged victims in this case. Bonjean said a pseudonym would remind you that the lens through which you need to look at the evidence is as if he is a John Doe, just anyone else, not Robert Kelly, not R. Kelly. Bonjean also wants jurors to consider the co-defendants' opinions as evidence of absolutely nothing. Remember, these are the men that have told you they knew nothing, they saw nothing. Therefore, their opinions are evidence of nothing. Bonjean is also reminding jurors that certain unflattering evidence about Kelly brought into the trial to establish people's state of mind is not charged evidence. She also says you can think he's the most amoral, unethical person on the planet, and that has nothing to do with whether the government has actually met its burden. Some of you probably clearly remember the 1990s. I do, and I'm guessing many of you do not, because I guess it's a mixed jury as far as age is concerned. Okay, so Bonjean tells jurors that Kelly was a young, shy, introverted kid who had a dream to make it in the music industry, like so many young people in this city. Bonjean says that Kelly was a musical genius, but couldn't read or really understand the contracts he was entering into. And she said the business of R. Kelly became quite a business. Bonjean tells jurors, I Believe I Can Fly was a beautiful song, and no matter what you ultimately decide in the jury room, this man did some beautiful things when it came to making music, and he should not be stripped of every bit of humanity that he has. Bonjean begins talking to jurors about the Oak Park Hotel meeting where Kelly allegedly confessed to Rashona's parents. Rashona and her mother described the meeting differently on the witness stand. Either way, Mr. Kelly did not tell either one of them to go lie before a grand jury or go give false testimony before a grand jury. Bonjean tells jurors that Rashona's parents lied to the Cook County grand jury because they didn't care. She was 17 years old, and they did not care that she was having a relationship at that point with Mr. Kelly. Now, she says there, at that point. So she never, and this was the part that bothered me, and once again, this is just live tweeting from the reporters. So there was a a lot more conversation that was had. And so I don't really want to form an opinion without actually seeing the full testimony. But just taking this at, face value, it says that she was having a relationship at that point with Mr. Kelly. Now that could be taken different ways. One way that it could be taken is that he was having a relationship with her, when she was younger. But at the point that the parents found out, they was just like, oh, well, what can we do about it? Or she could be saying at the point that all of this took place, that was when the relationship began and things had gotten out. And then the parents was just like, okay, it really doesn't matter. We're okay with you guys seeing each other. So I would have to actually see the transcript to get a clearer understanding before I can say what at that point actually meant. So then it could have been in relation. Well, no, because this would have been like in 2002, I think 2001, 2002. So no, that wouldn't work. But still, in what context is she using that statement? So then it goes on, and Bonjean says, for all the fist pounding and outrage, the family made a decision that they wanted to make at that time, and they lived with that decision. From that decision evolved a friendship that lasted decades. Bonjean is going over the 2019 text messages between Kelly and Rishona, who was trying to reach him after Surviving Lies aired. Bonjean says Kelly is the least obstructing person you've ever seen in these text messages, and this is when he should have been worried the most. Bonjean tells jurors that the purported rent payments from Kelly to Rishona were just that. It wasn't about obstructing justice. She's arguing the alleged conspiracy didn't last past July 2014, and that's a not guilty because they don't even get past the statute of limitations. Okay, they don't get past the statute of limitations. I don't know what that means. So I guess there's a statute of limitations on the conspiracy part. Interesting. So Bonjean on the theory that one tape was stolen by Lisa Van Allen containing the scenes with Rishona. Well, that is a bald-faced lie. That's a lie, like many of the other lies Van Allen told. Bonjean is talking about how Lisa Van Allen was 18 when she met Kelly and had sex with him. And I am not judging here, Bonjean says. That would make me a hypocrite. Bonjean says it is such a big deal that Lisa Van Allen earlier said she was 17 when she met Kelly. She says Van Allen was squarely 18 at the time. Bonjean, there were multiple tapes missing. It was complete chaos because there were lowlifes around Mr. Kelly who were trying to exploit him financially, and there were tapes that were obtained so they could shake him down. It's that simple. I don't know what the Kardashians call their sex tapes, maybe a performance tape. Bonjean is arguing that Chuck Freeman shook down Robert for a sex tape, the origins of which were unknown. Then, when Kelly was charged, Freeman saw an opportunity to exploit it. Bonjean insists the tape was not CP and not a threesome with Rishona. Bonjean on count 4 regarding the alleged video of a threesome between Kelly, Rishona, and Lisa Van Allen. On this count, they do not win on. This count, they have not proven. Why? Because they have not proven that the tape depicts what they said it depicts. You would have to believe Lisa Van Allen in the face of all types of things. Bonjean tells jurors counts 4 through 8 are not guilty. She's moving on to the counts alleging enticement of minors into criminal activity. Bonjean says she doesn't quarrel with the era of believe women outside the courtroom, but there is no place for this in the courtroom. Says mob-like thinking doesn't belong here. Okay, hold on. Bonjean is talking about Tracy and whether she met Kelly at age 16 in 1999, as she claimed, or age 17 in 2000. Bonjean calls it shameless that prosecutors have supported the 1999 thing. I'm going to control myself on that, Bonjean says. Bonjean asked jurors if it sounds familiar that Tracy claimed to be a year younger. There are people out there willing to lie about their age. You've seen it in this case, and Tracy is one of them. And then that's not this Tracy. Okay, this is Tracy Sampson that they're talking about. So on Tracy, Bonjean says, you've got to add a year to everything she says. Bonjean notes that Rashona never mentioned Tracy when she testified and couldn't identify her in the photo. Bonjean, do you not think that if Tracy had told the Cook County State's Attorney's Office in 2002, oh, I had a threesome with Rashona, they might have done something with that information? Moving on to Nia. Bonjean calls her a very nice woman on the stand, but says the government did not meet its burden, says it's a very old allegation from 1996. To suggest that he's going to send a white limo to a 15-year-old's house where her parents live to pick her up kind of shows Kelly's state of mind. Probably didn't think she was 15, and that is something they have to prove. Bonjean is running out of time, probably has about 18 minutes left. She tells someone, tell me when I have 10 minutes. Bonjean shifted gears to Pauline, says she has not a shrinking violet, who later says she was not a shrinking violet, who later tried to extort Kelly. Usually people who extort are not the most trustworthy, she said. Bonjean brings up Pauline's testimony about drinking hypnotic, which Bonjean notes did not come out into the market until September 2001, which was 1 month before Pauline's 17th birthday. Bonjean, Brittany. Who is Brittany? Where is Brittany? Brittany is the alleged victim who did not testify. That's greed. That's greediness on their part, and it's not proper. Bonjean says that Rashona falls into the category of believe some, not all. She is someone who has lied and has received financial gain, and she has an immunity agreement, and that is not to say that she has told falsehoods about everything. Bonjean gets her 10-minute warning. Bonjean on Rashona. We're not denying that this relationship commenced, and you heard the testimony. You will decide when the relationship commenced. Okay. And so on this, she was kind of like going along my theory. Like I believe that whatever happened between them happened between them. I just don't believe the age that it allegedly happened. I really believe that Rashona was probably like 17 years old. And it was around the time that, she started watching him. And I've given you guys my whole theory. I think she was a teenager. I think she, like a lot of us when we were teenagers, had fantasies about our favorite musicians and celebrities and actors and stuff like that. But she was up close and personal. She was in this industry with them. And she saw this lifestyle because she was there babysitting with Drea and that type of thing. And she probably picked up on the fact that him and Drea did not have the best relationship, even though they was pushing out all them babies every 2 years. And so I think when she moved in, she really did move in as the nanny, that she was helping take care of them kids. And I think she just got it in her mind. She probably saw what a whore he was, that he was cheating on Drea. He was doing all this stuff with these other women. And then she was like, why not me? Because she had this fantasy in her head about him. And then that doesn't excuse him. And so they're basically saying he went for it. So it doesn't excuse him if he was however old, 30, like in his 30s or whatever, that he's screwing the babysitter. But we know that there's a lot of men out there that screw the babysitter. And some of them end up divorcing their wives and marrying the babysitter. So that is what I actually think took place. I do not believe the whole 14, 15, 16 story. I think whatever happened between them happened after she moved in and was helping Drea with those kids. So where did I leave off? So she says, we're not denying that this relationship commenced, and you heard the testimony. You will decide when the relationship commenced. Bonjean is drilling down into whether Kelly used a phone to induce Rishona into criminal sexual activity. She says phone sex doesn't really cut it, tells jurors to look at instructions. Now Bonjean turns to counts 1 through 3, which she calls the most difficult and serious counts in the indictment against Kelly. Bonjean on the videos. No one is disputing that it's sexually explicit, but she says jurors do have to decide if they're authentic. Bonjean doesn't dispute that Rishona said it was her, but Bonjean is again drilling down into the technical aspects of the counts, and that prosecutors must show the videos were produced for the purpose of producing a visual depiction of such conduct. Was his purpose to create CP? Even if you believe that was his purpose, that's an element of the offense that they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And did the tapes cross state lines? Does anybody believe that Chuck Freeman held on to that for 20 years? She says it's possible the tapes never left Illinois. And I don't know why she's saying, has it been 20 years? So 2008, okay, so 20 years. 2002 was when all this started. And actually it would have been older than that, I guess, since they claiming, when did Lisa say she stole the tape? Was that 2001 or 2000? Because she started talking about she was stealing tapes every year or something, she said. But anyway, she's right about the 20 years. Boy, time flies. So Bonjean wrapping up by warning jurors about the Fed's upcoming rebuttal. They're going to take liberties, Bonjean says. Bonjean finishes by saying, go back there, please, and you remember that each count counts. And you do your job and take as long as you need because our system requires it. Mr. Kelly deserves it no matter what you think about him. Thank you. So jurors are out for a 15-minute break. The feds are asking for a jury instruction regarding arguments from Bonjean regarding former Kelly prosecutor Angel Cruel. So the jury, because she actually, in one of the other guys that tweets that I'm going to read, she does bring up Angel Cruel in her, or Kroll, who was the AUSA who started this whole case but ended up dropping out, who was having off-the-record conversations with Rishona and Jim Derogatis, and then claimed that she had to leave the state to go care for an ailing relative. So it goes on, and this is John Seidel continuing. The jury is coming back in. The feds have 1 more hour to deliver the final word in this case because they have the burden of proof. So AUSA Janice Appenteng kicks off her rebuttal by pointing to the words of Daryl McDavid, who she quotes as saying, R. Kelly had to have what he wanted. What Kelly wanted was to have sex with young individuals, Appenteng says. Robert Kelly is guilty of recording himself abusing Rishona when she was 14 over and over again. Talking about the video, she says, you saw how he was using her body, flipping her, throwing her around like she was some rag doll. Use Rishona as your base, as your guide. Everything happened to her in this case from beginning to end. Kelly's sexual abuse of her is clear. Kelly's counsel left alone any argument about whether it was Rishona or whether it was Kelly on the tape. And I thought that was interesting, but I guess she said she wasn't going to argue about it. And then I think the fact that she didn't argue about it kind of is a risk that you take, that some of the people will say, well, she couldn't have been that age because they didn't dispute that it was them on the tape. So I can see how that goes both ways. And let's see. In terms of authenticity, there is no question. You saw Rishona on that stand describe in vivid detail what happened to her in those videos and her recollection of it happening at the time. Appenteng says that McDavid's entire testimony was incredible and relied on 4 lawyers. She says, what you heard about these lawyers came from McDavid and McDavid alone, and 3 of the 4 of them are dead. Appenteng on the trial jury, and okay, so hold on a second. And what was interesting was the fact, because I think the Sam Adams man, isn't he still alive? So why wasn't he called to testify? So I'm assuming that's who she's talking about when she said that 3 of the 4 are no longer here. And let's see, what else do we have here? She says, did I read this already? Let me see. Okay, I'm down here. So on the trial, they heard that Kelly's 2008 state court case, that jury was scammed. They were scammed by Robert Kelly and his fixers, including Daryl McDavid, Jack Palladino, and others. The case was fixed. Appenteng disputes that Freeman pulled 2 of the at-issue videos off the internet, noting that the National Center for Missing and Exploiting Individuals had never before seen those videos. Freeman is the source of those videos. Okay, so I guess that was the purpose of them testifying, because remember they were saying that they had like 234 videos had been sent to them from around the country. And I guess it was mainly the ones that were being sold on the internet and at swap meets and that type of thing. So just because they didn't come across the video doesn't mean that the video wasn't out there, Miss Appenteng. So let's see. What else do they have here? Appenteng says the notion that Rishona doesn't appear on video 4 is another distraction. She says that the argument that the video featured Kelly, Lisa Van Allen, and Kelly's wife is based on one witness who did not say that it was Andrea Kelly. Okay, who was that witness? Then she goes on McDavid. You do not have to accept his incredible after-the-fact concocted story. Do not let him hide behind supposed words of 3 dead men. The time has come. Hold him accountable. And then she says of Brown that he was a knowing member of the conspiracy who was in Cancun and the Bahamas at the same time as Rishona and her family. Appenteng also says that Brown called video 4, allegedly, of Kelly, Rishona, and Lisa Van Allen the golden egg. You can't explain that one away. And then who said that he said it was the golden egg? Wasn't it the criminals that stole the tape that said that he said it? All this he say, she say. So Appenteng says that Brown can be both the personal assistant and part of the conspiracy. Blaming Rishona about the abuse remaining secret, that's just shameful. She makes clear that the charge involving Tracy contemplates ages 16 and 17, says it's not true that the feds just let it fly when it came to the age problem. And then she gets an 8-minute warning. And so regarding Brittany, Appenteng says that Rishona and Pauline's testimony is sufficient. So I guess they testified for Brittany, who just up and disappeared. Now, according to the reporters, it was never revealed in court why Brittany did not testify. But then the word on the street is that she was part of the shaking leg challenge that was on TikTok using one of Mr. Kelly's one of his songs. It was a dance challenge, and that she had posted that video, and that challenge was rather recent. So I don't think she would have been a good witness, because then Bonjean could have brought it up and then played the video for the jury, and that would have led to bigger problems. So then it says, regarding the accusers who testified, look at the pain that it caused them to testify, Appenteng said. They exposed themselves to being questioned by strangers. She says that Kelly's own purported abuse is another distraction. It does not give Mr. Kelly license to repeatedly abuse girl after girl. So she finishes up and she tells jurors to find Kelly guilty of abusing young women, find him guilty of abusing Rashona, and for recording himself abusing her over and over again. Okay, so is this about Rashona? Is it about Mya and Tracy and all the other people? Like, they don't deserve justice? So, I wonder if the jury picked up on that little tidbit. So the judge is having instructions passed out to the jury so they can follow along while he reads them. So then we're going to go down to Dave Burns and his live tweets. And it says that Kelly's federal trial in Chicago is starting an hour early this morning to give Kelly's defense attorney, Jennifer Bonjean, as much time as possible to deliver closing statements. The attorneys for Kelly's co-defendants gave their own closing arguments yesterday. And guys, remember, some of this is going to sound repetitive, because these are, multiple people in the courtroom that are live tweeting about it. But the reason we are reading multiple accounts is because sometimes these people will put information in that the other person did not. And so we're just hoping to get a little more information. So Bonjean moved twice yesterday to dismiss the case against Kelly, claiming mistrial. She argued that Kelly's co-defendants implied the former singer was guilty in their closings, unfairly prejudicing the jury. Presiding Judge Larry Lennon Weber denied her motions. Following Bonjean's closing arguments, federal prosecutors are expected to deliver a rebuttal before the jury begins deliberating. Kelly is facing 13 criminal charges. His co-defendant Daryl McDavid faces 4. And co-defendant number 3, Milton Brown, faces only 1 count. Court is currently delayed a bit while waiting for a juror to arrive. Starting at 9 a.m. It's different, Bonjean says. So prosecution is raising an issue with Judge Lennon Weber objecting to a comment yesterday by Daryl McDavid attorney Bo Brindley. Brindley said the government waited too long to bring this case against McDavid, Brown, and Kelly. Lennon Weber sides with the prosecution. He says Bonjean can mention the difficulties inherent to defending a client whose alleged crimes happened more than 20 years ago, but cannot imply wrongdoing on the government's part for not charging Kelly until 2019. So Bonjean, beginning her closing arguments, she starts by thanking the jury for their attentiveness in this challenging case. Bonjean goes on to say she faces an uphill battle defending Kelly, as Kelly has a controversial public image. She advises the jury to think of Kelly as a John Doe. You cannot let sympathy, fear, or public opinion influence your work, she says. Bonjean says the prosecution has an incredible advantage in this case because they're getting some help from the co-defendants. She argues that attorneys for Daryl McDavid and Milton Brown have implied Kelly's guilt. Bonjean reminds the jury that they must try each co-defendant separately and must likewise address each charge they face separately. She also says the law requires the jury to assume Kelly's innocence in each charge before beginning to consider the evidence. Bonjean also brings up the 20-plus year delay between the alleged crimes of Kelly and co-defendants, saying the jury should also consider that delay. Bonjean says the jury should not consider the prosecution's negative characterization of Kelly as evidence. Your beliefs about Mr. Kelly's character, even if it's justified, is not relevant, she says. The prosecution's attempt to portray Kelly as an immoral man are a distraction, Bonjean says. They are meant to lose your humanity for this man and prevent you from really scrutinizing this evidence, she says. Bonjean now attempting to portray a more fulsome picture of Kelly. She paints him as a functionally illiterate, immature, poor man from the south side of Chicago who, despite his musical genius, needed other people to help him manage his music career. Kelly quickly rose to stardom and was surrounded by people who exploited him financially, Bonjean says, adding, he should not be stripped of every bit of humanity that he has. Bonjean alleges to the jury that just as she said in the start of the trial, the government case is based on testimony from people who have financial motivations, especially people like Chuck Freeman, who have immunity deals with the government. It is your job to decide generally who is telling the truth here and who is not, arguing that some of the witnesses in the trial are untrustworthy. When you find a cockroach in your soup, you don't just throw out the cockroach and eat the rest of the soup, Bonjean says. She says the government's case has too many cockroaches in it. Bonjean muses if Lisa Van Allen and Chuck Freeman will face further prosecution, suggesting they violated their immunity agreements. The jury should be skeptical of the government's indictment against Kelly and co-defendants. Bonjean says she tells them that the indictment is just the government's theory on what they think happened, not facts. A ham sandwich can be indicted, she says. Bonjean says there is no evidence that Kelly induced Rishona to allegedly lie to the Cook County grand jury in 2002, claiming instead that Rishona just didn't want her parents to know anything. She never told you that Kelly told her to lie, Bonjean says. Mr. Kelly did not tell either of them to go give false testimony to a grand jury, she says of Rishona and her mother, Valerie. Bonjean getting into the 2001 meeting between Rishona's parents, and Kelly, where Rishona allegedly revealed that she and Kelly were in a sexual relationship. Bonjean says the testimony from Rishona and Valerie about the meeting is too desperate for the jury to ignore. Let me see. To ignore. Okay. Bonjean alleges that in 2001, Rishona's parents didn't care, and then didn't care is in quotations, that she was in a relationship with Kelly. She was 17 years old, and they did not care at that point that she was having a relationship with Kelly, Bonjean claims. And as I told you in John Seidel's live tweets, those three words, at that point, can have multiple meanings, and so we need to figure out what exactly she was meaning when she said at that point. So continuing on, Bonjean says there is no evidence that Rishona's family was paid off for their cooperation in the 2002 grand jury. She instead suggests that Rishona, her family, and Kelly have had a decades-long friendship from before 2001 all the way up through 2019. Bonjean gets into texts between Rishona and Kelly from before the 2019 indictment, noting their friendly tone, happy birthday wishes, condolences for family deaths, etc. Bonjean says the text, like any discussion regarding some shady deal for Rishona or her family's cooperation in the 2019 indictment and this trial. Moving on to the $1.3 million settlement agreement between McDavid and Kelly, she says the agreement's strict confidentiality clause means nothing, despite the government's claims otherwise. She says most settlement agreements include a confidentiality clause. Bonjean also says that Kelly's several rent payments to Rishona is not evidence of conspiracy, saying it was just a wealthy man being generous with someone he cared about while she was going through a rough time. And my thing is, child, if what the government is alleging was true is true, he would have had to give me a whole, well, first of all, He couldn't have gave me no money if it was my child. Okay, so that would have been first and foremost. But if I was of that mindset where I would take money over harm to my child, it would have been a whole bunch of money. It wouldn't have been no, rent payment here or used car. No, he would have had to give me millions upon millions upon millions. Just like Darren McDavid was collecting 10% of his earnings, I would have been collecting 25, 30% of his earnings before Darren McDavid got his 10%. But that's just me. But like I said, we would have went to the police before that thought even entered my mind. But if I was that type of person, yeah, he would have been paying me very well. So then she says, the government wants to make this case really neat and tidy, but they can't. Getting into the complex narrative surrounding Lisa Van Allen, Keith Murrell, who somebody told me it was Morel. But here where I live, it is Murrell. But we're going to call him Morel because I guess that's how they pronounce it down in Kansas City. And Chuck Freeman, she accuses Van Allen of lying on the stand on several occasions. Bonjean calls Van Allen a liar and a thief, one who stole Kelly's property. People who steal are typically not the most truthful people in the world. So doubling down on Van Allen, Bonjean accuses her of lying about her age to Kelly when she met and slept with him on the set of Home Alone. And that's something that the jury also needs to look into, is just how easy it was. Because Lisa says she had no plans to go, didn't know nothing about this thing until the day of it. And somebody invited her to go to the set. She goes to the set, she meets him, and then she immediately has sex with him. Like, if I'm on the jury, I'm just like, okay, first of all, none of these people were virgins. Let's start with that. So they already had some sexual experience going on. And just how easy they all claim to have slept with him is just boggling my mind. So anyway, she says the only reasonable reference, okay, we already read Chuck. Let's go back down here. Bonjean repeats her assertion that the tape Lisa Van Allen, oh no, I'm too far down now. Okay, when she met and slept with him on the set of the Home Alone video in 1998, she says she would have remembered her age, 18, after having sex with such a famous person. Bonjean says that Kelly was surrounded by lowlifes around him who wanted to shake him down over the leaked sex tapes that allegedly featured a minor. The only reasonable inference is that Chuck Freeman shook down Kelly for a sex tape, Bonjean says, now addressing Chuck Freeman's testimony and his story of allegedly finding the CP featuring Kelly in a house in Atlanta. Bonjean repeats her assertion that the tape Lisa Van Allen sent to Keith Morrell in 2002 was not CP with Rishona, but actually a threesome featuring Kelly Van Allen and Kelly's then wife Andrea, all legal adults at the time. And then I also thought that maybe she should have brought up, because there have been other people like DeLeon Sheffield who have said that there were sex tapes. And then also I think with the sex tape with DeLeon, I think it was some issue about getting that back from him or making sure it didn't get out. And then there were other people, who have admitted that, yeah, I did do these tapes with him, but I was an adult. And so the fact that, but then I guess, you don't want to bring other people in and then get them all exposed, all their business out there. But that whole DeLeon story, like that was in the news and stuff. So she goes on and says, Bonjean brings up Kelly's deceased attorney, Ed Jensen's alleged opinion that the Van Allen tape was not CP. She says Jensen, a high-profile attorney, would not have risked his law license by helping cover up CP. Bonjean brings up the absence of a video 4 mentioned in the government's indictment, but never shown to the jury in this trial. She alleges that the jury never saw video 4 because No such video actually exists. Moving on, the indictment counts Kelly faces are allegedly having sex with 5 individuals. Bonjean tells the jury to disregard any sympathies for Me Too style social movements that they may hold. We don't just believe women or just believe men. There is no place for that kind of mob thinking in a courtroom. Bonjean attacks Tracy, specifically saying she lied and made herself a full year younger in her testimony. Tracy testified she met Kelly at the Black Women's Expo in 1999, but defense attorneys later provided evidence the expo didn't occur until 2000. Bonjean says the government put Tracy on the stand to lie to you all. Bonjean also references Tracy's civil lawsuit against Kelly, which likewise states that the Black Expo was in 2000. Lawyers don't make up information in complaints, she says. Bonjean claims that Tracy's alleged threesome with Rishona never happened, noting it is not mentioned in her civil lawsuit against Kelly. Bonjean also claims Rishona could not identify Tracy in a photograph. Everybody wants to claim threesomes with Rishona, Bonjean says. Now, I have to agree with her there, because I was reading them transcripts like, okay, well, who in Chicago did not sleep with Rishona? So Bonjean says everything has been pushed back a year with Tracy. Bonjean claims because Tracy testified she had sex with Kelly at 17, it means she would have actually been 18 if that sex ever actually occurred. She calls Tracy a pathological liar. Bonjean now getting into Mya's testimony. She says as Kelly allegedly sent a limo to pick her up at her Atlanta home and flew her to Minneapolis for free, that he likely didn't think she was 15 at the time. Bonjean adds Mya testified that she came to Chicago of her own volition after seeing Kelly at his concert in Minneapolis, that he didn't arrange her visit. Oh, okay. Wow. So Neil said that Kelly allegedly had some kind of sexual encounter in his Chicago track studio during her visit, but Bonjean says the government has not proven beyond a reasonable doubt that this encounter occurred as Mya described. Moving on to Pauline, Bonjean says she gave inconsistent testimony and had a terrible demeanor. She also accuses Pauline of trying to extort Kelly. Pauline did not deny this in her testimony, but claimed it was just a bluff to get Kelly's attention. And let me stick a pin here before I forget this. So Dennis Byron with the Hip Hop Inquirer, I think, and he also works for TMZ, but he did a video, I believe it was yesterday, where he was saying that they had, so they had reporters and spectators in the courtroom. So he said for the closing arguments, like normally when a person testifies, they go on about their business, right? They don't come back and watch other testimony. They're not there for the closing arguments. But he said that they had all the alleged victims lined up. Everybody that testified, or most of the people that testified, at least the women, were lined up on the front pew, and then pushed the spectators up into the overflow room. And he said that he thought that that was just so odd that they would have them in there seated on the front row, and that it was just weird. And so I'm thinking, if the jury, how did the jury receive that? Did they receive that as, okay, the government is playing with us, or did it cause sympathy? Like, what exactly was it? And so now I'm wondering, was that yesterday that the lady had the nervous breakdown? Maybe that's why she had the nervous breakdown, because she was sitting there looking at all these poor alleged victims, and it just disturbed her, child. I don't know. But anyway, where was I? Okay, Pauline with her nasty attitude. Let's see. Pauline testified earlier. Okay. Moving on to Pauline, Bonjean says she gave inconsistent testimony and had a terrible demeanor. She also accuses Pauline of trying to extort Kelly. Pauline did not deny this in her testimony, but claimed it was just a bluff to get Kelly's attention. Pauline testified earlier in the trial that Kelly served her hypnotic when she was a minor, but Bonjean points out that the drink was not released until 2001, when Pauline would have been 17, the legal age of consent. And then I don't know why she keeps harping on the legal age of consent, because I think I talked about this in one of the videos I posted earlier today from yesterday, is that so the legal age of consent in Chicago is 17. The federal legal age of consent, I believe, is 18, but that 18 applies to, like trafficking and stuff, taking people across state lines to have sex with them, and then also making visual depictions of people, right? So she keeps talking about the legal age of consent, but then she also got to consider the charges against him, and based on those charges, then it's not a legal age of consent. So, yeah, that's just been confusing to me. So Bonjean now moving on to the absence of a witness that prosecution said in their opening statements would testify. Brittany, who is Brittany? Bonjean says Brittany never did testify. The prosecution has never addressed her absence. Bonjean also bringing up that Brittany was referenced as boss baby in the contact list. No, that wasn't Brittany. That was Rashona, who was listed as boss baby in the contact list of Assistant U.S. Attorney Angel Kroll, saying it is inappropriate for a federal agent to be that familiar with a witness in a case they are prosecuting. I hope she didn't say boss baby was Brittany. I hope that's a typo by the reporter. So moving on to the alleged phone sex Rashona had with Kelly as a minor, Bonjean says phone sex doesn't really cut it as proof of an indictment. Bonjean wrapping up her closing, because I guess there's no proof that, that's what they were talking about on the phone, right? So Bonjean wrapping up her closing now, saying the jury has to decide the government has proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Bonjean says that regarding the alleged underage Rashona tape, the jury saw that jury should consider if the tape is real, how many times the tape has changed hands, if it's really Rashona in the tape, etc. So I'm glad she finally touched on that, because that was really, really bothering me. So addressing the portion of Kelly's CP charges and alleged he moved CP across state lines, Bonjean claims that Van Allen tape was stolen from him, that he never deliberately moved it across state lines. And then he also didn't create it to take it across state lines. So Bonjean also repeats that the chain of custody of Chuck Freeman tape can't be established. It may well have never left Illinois, for all the jury knows. So Bonjean closes by telling the jury to take as long as they need and asks them to find Kelly not guilty on all counts. She says reasonable inferences comes from facts and that the government hasn't proved enough facts. So with Bonjean finished, presiding judge Harry Lennon Weber calls for a 15-minute break. And then the trial in Chicago now resuming, with prosecution up to give their final rebuttal. Prosecutor Janice Appenteng is up to give the government's rebuttal. Kelly had to have what he wanted. Those are the words of that man, Daryl McDavid. And what R. Kelly wanted was to have sex with these individuals, she said. She shoots back at Bonjean's characterization of Van Allen and Freeman as liars and extortionists, reminding the jury that Kelly, McDavid, and Brown are on trial, not Van Allen and Freeman. She says the videos the jury will have access to include scenes where Kelly instructed Rashona to dance for him, tried to make her appear as a prostitute, and had her call him daddy. She says that the jury to use Rishona as the lens to which to examine the evidence because everything happened to her. She calls Rishona's testimony the guidepost that the jury can refer to as they deliberate. Kelly got Rishona to bring her friends Pauline and Brittany to include in their relationship as part of Kelly's process to build trust and loyalty among the alleged individuals. Kelly and McDavid recruited Chuck Freeman to do the dirty work to recover Kelly's leaked tape allegedly featuring Rishona. She blames other Rishona tapes surfacing not to Freeman lying, but on Kelly being prolific while allegedly making CP. Kelly tried to keep Rishona out of sight leading up to the 2008 Cook County trial. She says his alleged plan, she says, was endangered by Freeman threatening to hold a press conference in 2008. McDavid paid Freeman to keep the truth suppressed, she claims. Well, I thought they said that Rishona was out in the parking lot in the tour bus. The only time I remember them mentioning her going out of town was for the 2-week vacation back in 2002. Okay. So Appenteng says that the entirety of Darren McDavid's multiple day testimony was incredible, claiming that he laid blame for any suspicious activity at the feet of the dead attorneys Jerry Margolis and Ed Jensen to avoid implicating himself. Not only does McDavid remove himself from the narrative, she says that he brought the lawyers into it. She says that McDavid is conveniently absent anytime he may have been implicated in any of Kelly's alleged attempts to cover up his relationship with Rishona. So of course he was absent because he said he wasn't there. Y'all the ones that saying he was there. So Appenteng claims, of course, that McDavid was in the room with Rishona's parents, and Kelly during the 2001 meeting in which Kelly allegedly confessed to having a relationship with Rishona. McDavid was too important a figure in Kelly's life to be waiting outside in the car during the 2001 meeting, she says. I could see him waiting in the car if he didn't want to hear, because if you can't hear what being said, then you sure enough can't testify to it, right? So there's no question that as of 2002, that McDavid knows the truth of Kelly's relationship with Rishona. Okay. And I think we can all agree on that, but it is still a question of when the relationship began. So Appenteng claims the 2008 state trial in which Kelly was acquitted of 22 CP charges was fixed because Kelly, McDavid, and other fixers convinced Rishona to lie to the 2002 grand jury. That jury was scammed. Moving on to Chuck Freeman, Appenteng credits him as the source of videos 2 and 3, which the jury will have access to in deliberations. However, much they want to kick him around, they can't deny that those videos came from him. So addressing the claim by defense that Rishona does not appear in video 4 and instead features Kelly's wife Andrea, Rishona says the only sources of that claim are 2 people, one of whom is Ed Jensen, and he is dead. Again, says McDavid's testimony is dishonest, that as Kelly's close friend and manager, he had to have known that Kelly was having sex with Rishona. Do not let him hide behind 3 dead men, Appenteng says, referencing Margolis, Jensen, and Palladino. Appenteng says, responding to Bonjean's claims that payments Kelly made to Jane over the years had nothing to do with any conspiracy, that individual actions in a conspiracy can be perfectly legal. In other words, Appenteng is saying that Kelly didn't have to call the rent payments he made to Rishona hush money for them to have actually been hush money. Appenteng moving on to the 2014 settlement agreement between McDavid and Kelly, stating the confidentiality clause required McDavid to keep quiet about Kelly's personal, not just professional life. Appenteng now addressing the alleged involvement of Milton Brown in the conspiracy to cover up Kelly's underage tapes. Freeman testified to getting $10,000 from Brown in 2008, and Brown also allegedly accompanied Rishona's family to Cancun and the Bahamas in 2001. But is she leaving out the part that Brown seemed to go to the Bahamas a lot? So it wasn't just that 2001 trip that y'all presented. There were several other times that he went to the Bahamas. So Brown was a knowing member of the conspiracy, she says. So Appenteng rejects the claim by Brown's attorney, Mary Judge, that Brown was just another work a day of what work? I don't know, I guess that's a term, work-a-day employee of Kelly's. Mr. Brown handled key tasks that would not have been given to someone who was not in the know, Appenteng says. Appenteng attacks defense attorney's prior assertion that Rishona knowingly protected Kelly before the 2002 grand jury and leading up to the 2008 Cook County trial, blaming Rishona. That's just shameful. Addressing Tracy, Appenteng says her 2001 civil lawsuit against Kelly references a threesome with another female and Kelly, even if it never directly mentions Rishona. Bonjean objects, but Lennon Weber overrules. Appenteng, rebutting Bonjean, says it doesn't matter if Kelly's alleged abuse of Tracy occurred when she was 16 or 17. She was still under 18, despite 17 being the age of consent in Illinois. 18 is the federal age of consent, and this is a federal trial, child. So y'all just moving the goalposts. And let's see, Rishona and Pauline's testimony is sufficient. Regarding Brittany, Appenteng says that both women referenced having threesomes with Kelly and Brittany while they were underage. Appenteng now expressing credulity at Bonjean's arguments that several of Kelly's alleged victims testified only in exchange for material benefits. Do you think Rishona would put herself, what she went through, on the stand for Section 8 housing? Appenteng wrapping up now, saying that Bonjean's characterization of Kelly as an abuse victim himself is a distraction. Asked the jury to find Kelly, McDavid, Brown guilty, saying Kelly's alleged victims are the center of the case. Although they're women now, Rishona was a child when Kelly asked her what color were her panties, Appenteng says. Appenteng has finished the government's rebuttal. Presiding Judge Harry Lennon Weber is now reading jury instructions, and some of those he tells the jury they must be impartial, to not let sympathy, fear of public opinion affect their judgment, and likewise do not consider the defendant's race. Lennon Weber continues to say that jurors cannot consider anything they've heard out of court as evidence, and likewise that the attorney's arguments in closing cannot be considered evidence in and of themselves. He's going over more boilerplate jury instructions, how to use notes, their access to evidence, that they must consider the possible guilt of all three defendants separately. And then he told the jury they must consider whether any of the alleged tapes they have access to cross state or county lines anywhere along their chain of command. Well, we know they did because Lisa Van Allen says she mailed it. She mailed it to Kansas. Okay, so then we're going to go on to Jason Mesner with the Chicago Tribune. And it says, we are awaiting the starting of closing arguments by Kelly's lawyer, Jennifer Bonjean. She has a little under 2 hours to make her case. A jury is running late. So there's a slight delay. Meanwhile, let's take a look back at last September when Kelly lawyer Deverell Canick began his closing argument in New York City by comparing Kelly's quest for justice to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Canick quoted from King's "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech, saying that like King, Kelly was trying to make the government was trying to make the government be true to what's on paper. That's all Robert is trying to do, Canick said. Not sure that one landed with the jury. Okay, so then goes on and says, Bonjean begins by saying jurors should treat Kelly like a John Doe. We are asking really the impossible of you, right? To put that all aside and decide this case based only on what was put into evidence. She said that getting some help from the co-defendant in this case in various ways throughout. She says that the feds are getting some help from the co-defendants in this case. In various ways throughout this trial, there has been this undercurrent of, well, Kelly may have abused Rishona and may have abused young women, but we didn't know anything about it. That's unfair. Bonjean, believe it or not, as Kelly sits here right now, he is presumed innocent. Notwithstanding that these charges are 25 years old, their burden doesn't change. That's not our problem. That is their problem, she says. Bonjean tells the jury unflattering evidence about Kelly was absolutely nothing to do with the charges, including accusations and lawsuits brought by Susan Loggins and her industry of suing Kelly, or sex tapes involving dancers and baseball players' wives. Oh, okay, so she did mention DeLeon. Okay, all right, wives and even a man. They're banking on it. They throw labels around like sex predator. They're meant for you to lose your humanity for this man and prevent you from really scrutinizing his evidence. She says that Kelly struggled with his own serious sexual abuse trauma on his way to becoming the superstar. He was someone who was entirely unequipped to handle all that comes with it. He was a musical genius. He had to rely on other people to handle the business of R. Kelly. Nearly all the government witnesses had immunity deals. They are valuable things for criminals like Chuck Harmon, she says. Bonjean says if you find a cockroach in your soup, you don't just toss the roach and eat the soup. You throw out the whole soup. There are just too many cockroaches with these witnesses, she said. Bonjean says that the parent of Kelly's young goddaughter, Rishona, lied to the grand jury about her relationship with the singer because they didn't care. So like here, you can tell that he's miscategorizing what she said because somebody else quoted the full sentence. And then also, I'm wondering, did she ever say that Rishona was the goddaughter, or was that just Brown and McDavid who were using that term? Because it would just be weird to me that she would have agreed that Rishona was the goddaughter and then also turn around and say, well, yeah, they did have a relationship. That would just be creepy for me. So Bonjean says that the parents of Kelly's young goddaughter, Rishona, lied to the grand jury about her sexual relationship with the singer because they didn't care. She was 17 and they didn't care, Bonjean said. They condoned it. Bonjean talking about Kelly's relationship with Rishona and her family. It is an inconvenient reality for the government, she says. Lives are complex, and for all the fist pounding and the outrage, that family made a decision that they had to live with at that time. Bonjean notes that when Surviving Lies was coming out, Rishona repeatedly reached out to Kelly, but he never tried to influence her in any way. He changed his phone number. He goes silent on her. This is the most disinterested person in obstructing that I have ever seen. Bonjean says that rent payments and other assistance Kelly provided to Rishona are not overt acts of a further conspiracy. So I wonder if he changed his phone number because his attorneys were like, do not talk to that girl. That girl is, because people had already been saying that she had been going to meet with the prosecutors because you know that the Cook County indictment came down in March. And she had talked to them. It came out that she was one of the people in the indictment. And then when the Chicago indictment came down, the Northern District of Illinois indictment came down, she was a part of that case. So his lawyers were probably telling him, do not talk to her. Don't answer any phone calls from her or anything. And so he changed his number. Let's see. That the rent payments and other assistance he provided are not overt acts to further a conspiracy. It's just because life is complicated. These people went on to have a relationship. I can't profess to understand it, but it is what the facts are. Bonjean has turned to Lisa Van Allen, who she calls a liar and a thief. She is willing to frame men for, I don't know, identity theft, sex trafficking. There is no crime apparently this woman won't commit, Bonjean says. Bonjean also brings up Facebook messages Van Allen sent to Keith Morrell around the time of Surviving Lies, talking about Daryl McDavid's alleged comment about having her murked. Bonjean says that the messages were a subversive and kind of gross to plant a false memory. Bonjean notes that the contract with Chuck Freeman was to get back a performance tape. I'm sure that's what all the celebrities call it in their contracts, Bonjean says. I'm not sure what the Kardashians call their sex tapes. Bonjean says all the testimony shows the tape Freeman got was a threesome with consenting adults, not CP. I've never met a lawyer willing to commit a crime in the name of a client, she says. Why? Because we value our bar license. We value our bar license too much. Lawyers don't do that. Bonjean says that count 4 of the indictment is not guilty because they have not proven it depicts CP. Unlike the other 3 CP counts against Kelly, jurors have not seen this tape. Regarding the other alleged victims, Bonjean brings up the length of time it took to bring charges and the Me Too movement. Even though we are in the era of believing women, there is no place for those types of sort of mob-like thinking in a courtroom. Bonjean has about 20 minutes left on her time. She's moved on to the last 5 counts of the indictment involving the 5 accusers. Tracy, she says, is a liar, beginning with claiming she met Kelly in 1999 when she was 16. She lied and made herself a whole year younger. Bonjean notes that Tracy, like 4 other witnesses, testified Kelly forced her to have a threesome with Rashona. Everybody wants to claim a threesome with Rashona, Bonjean says, noting that the allegations was not contained in her lawsuit against Kelly. Bonjean has about 10 minutes left, but has yet to talk about accusers Brittany, Nia, or Pauline. Bonjean says there is good reason to doubt the story from Nia, including whether she really told Kelly she was 15 when she approached him for an autograph at a mall in Georgia. Women are approaching him at every turn in malls everywhere, she says. Bonjean says Nia and her cousin allegedly showed up uninvited for the most part to Kelly's music studio and that their sexual encounter lasted 5 minutes. You have to decide whether this conduct 26 years ago was proven beyond a reasonable doubt. We submit they have not. Bonjean is talking about Pauline. Okay, well, didn't Nia's cousin say that nothing happened between them because she was there and that they were in the hallway talking for about 5 minutes? Okay, Bonjean is talking about Pauline now, who was Jane's or Rashona's best friend. She says that Pauline's demeanor was terrible on the stand and notes that her statements have changed over the years. Countdown to Bonjean mentioning hypnotic in 10, 9, 8. And there it is, Bonjean reading her testimony about Kelly giving her hypnotic when she was 14 to 16. It hit the market when she was 17. Bonjean, Brittany. Who is Brittany? Where is Brittany? Brittany never testified, though prosecutors told jurors in opening statement they'd heard from her. We don't know anything about Brittany. Bonjean says that's greed. That's greediness on their part, and it's not proper. Bonjean brings up prosecutor Angel Crowell's text messages with Rashona, who was in her phone contacts as Boss Baby. Boss Baby and hearts and send me your pregnancy photos. This is manipulation, and why is manipulation to curate a narrative that suits them. Bonjean acknowledges the first 3 counts, which deal with Kelly's alleged production of tapes of him abusing Rashona, are the most difficult and serious counts of the indictment. She says the jury has to decide whether the technical elements of the charges are proven. Bonjean has 1 minute left by my calculations. Bonjean ends by saying to watch out for prosecutors taking liberties in their rebuttal. Reasonable inferences come from evidence from facts, not based on hunches. She says they find Kelly not guilty on all charges, or she asks that they find him not guilty on all charges, and that's it. 15-minute recess. On break, prosecutors are saying Bonjean made an improper argument when talking about Angel Crowell's inappropriate text to Jane or Rashona. They want an instruction to the jury. Lennon Weber says he never made a ruling either way, and it's fair argument to say what you want about them. We are back in the Kelly trial. Assistant U.S. Attorney Janice Appenteng is delivering her rebuttal. What Kelly wanted was to have sex, and what the people around him wanted, they wanted to help their boss, including helping him get away with it. Appenteng talking about the tape of Kelly abusing Rashona. You saw how, and I read that in one of the other people, I'm not reading that again. She says, use Rashona as the basis of their consideration of the indictment because everything happened to her in this case from beginning to end. His abuse of her is clear. Because Kelly had been so prolific in creating tapes of Rashona, no sooner had they gotten the tape from Charles Freeman, word was circulating that video one was out. Appenteng says the claim by Darren McDavid's lawyer yesterday that he was never caught in a lie was ridiculous. Ladies and gentlemen, his entire testimony was incredible. The whole thing. McDavid just takes himself out of the situation. He's not in Kansas City. He's not on the phone with Freeman. Couldn't see the video at trial. During any key event where he would have knowledge of Kelly's abuse of Rashona, he is conveniently absent. She says of the 2008 trial, that jury was scammed. They were scammed by Robert Kelly and his fixers. The case was fixed because Robert Kelly, Darren McDavid, and others caused Rashona to lie to the grand jury and be absent from trial. Child, where was Rashona during the trial? Because I thought she was on the bus. But anyway, do you not have to accept McDavid's incredible after the fact concocted story? Do not let him hide the supposed words of their dead men. The time has come. Hold him accountable. Appenteng says that the confidentiality agreement reached between McDavid and Kelly only went one way for a reason. Kelly was the celebrity that was having sex with individuals and recording it and keeping it in a gym bag. Appenteng says that Brown was a knowing member of the conspiracy, saying he was sent to Cancun with Rashona and her parents to keep an eye on them at a critical time in the trial. He was also in the room when the threesome tape with Van Allen, Kelly, and Rashona was shown, she says. Appenteng brings up testimony that June Brown called the threesome tape exactly what it was. He called it the golden egg. You can't explain that one way. Okay, she's challenging the idea that Brown has done nothing more than being a Kelly employee like Tom Arnold. No one ever put Tom Arnold at a meeting with a bag of cash when people were taking lie detector tests about CP, she says. Appenteng has received her 8-minute warning from the judge. We're just about there. Jury should have the case by 1 p.m. Regarding Brittany, the alleged victim who did not testify, Appenteng says it was sufficient that Rashona and Pauline testified about what Kelly did to Brittany when they were there. Appenteng says not at the pain it caused the victims to testify, bringing up the allegation that Rashona was swayed by Section 8 housing help from prosecutors. Oh, look at the pain it caused. I'm sorry. You think Rashona would put herself through what she did on that stand for Section 8 housing? Then Appenteng is done, ending by saying that the defendants are all guilty of each count. So guys, what do you think? I mean, I'm sure there was a whole lot more detailed when they were actually talking, but these were the overviews that were provided by the reporters. So go ahead, leave your comment below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye bye.